Well, I think traditionally operators have always looked at it as they are our members and we're going to ring fence them. They belong to us and we're going to stop them going anywhere else. I think members nowadays are going, actually, I don't want one experience. I want multiple experiences. And if we ran it parallel to something like restaurants, you don't go to one restaurant exclusively and not go anywhere else in your spare time. You might.
Right, we're live. Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. I'm Matthew Januszek, and I'm here with my co-host Mohammed Iqbal, who for the first time I can remember for quite a long time seems to be in his home studio. So Mo, how are you doing today?
Good. I am in my home studio. I feel like I've been on the road a lot, but some of it just happens to be when we're recording the episodes. But I'm traveling, but I'm trying to think where I was last week. Was I in London last week?
I think it was in Dallas, actually. Yeah, in Dallas on the way to Los Angeles. There you go. I know more than you
I
know.
was on the way to Los Angeles, and I was in London the week before that. Yeah. And next week, you actually don't even know this yet, but I'm going to be in Minnesota.
Oh, very good.
And then I'm going to see you in person for the Athletech Summit, which we are pretty excited about. We've got a really special event planned there. Matthew, how about you tell the audience about the event we've got planned?
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to being part of the Athletech event in New York. It was a great event last year. And then this year we're doing something a little bit special where we're collaborating with the team at Connected Health and Fitness, and we're going to be doing a private dinner on the Tuesday evening where we've got about 30 select guests that are going to be there for conversations, podcasting, and a great steak dinner in what is it? I can't remember the restaurant, but it's what is it? Was it like Prime Rib? Or no, something like, I always called it Prime Rib.
I don't know the name because we don't want people to just crash and
okay, all right, there you go.
It is a very exclusive dinner where for the first time we've done the dinners before, but we've never kind of done the podcast live with 3 very special guests, industry leaders, with an audience of industry leaders. And then we're going to have a private Q&A that we're not going to record. And I'm excited for the honest and very transparent open conversations. In addition, we're going to be at the event as well.
We've got a very special guest on. I think we've had this gentleman on at least 2 or 3 times. He always throws in a number of curveballs. So I'll let you do the honors, Mo, and introduce our guest today.
Today's guest has spent more than 3 decades studying one of the most important questions in fitness. Why do people join gyms, and then why do they leave? He started on the gym floor as an instructor and a personal trainer, went on to become a fitness manager, then a GM, then built one of the deepest research bodies in the world around member retention. His work has analyzed the behavior of 5.5 million customers across more than 4,500 clubs and facilities. He's delivered almost 200 international presentations in 31 countries. He's worked with more than 100 companies across 4 continents, including companies that I'm at. He's completed a PhD in behavioral science, focused especially on health club retention. The industry has called him the retention guru, which I still call him as well. We know him also as Dr. Paul Bedford. Dr. Paul, welcome to Lifts.
Thank you, Mo. Hi, Matt.
We can't talk about retention typically the way that the industry talks about it. I've spoken about this a few times at some events early this year. Here's some examples. For years, retention was treated as a metric. We talked about things like how many members joined, how many members canceled, what the average length of stay was, what the attrition rate was. And in many markets, operators had some protection, right? These were in the terms of long-term contracts, a lot of friction around cancellation, low usage was still translated to recurring revenue, and a consumer who had fewer fitness options than they do today. But fast forward to 2026 and even looking forward to 2027, that world is changing very quickly. Today, the fitness consumer has choice like they've never had before. They can join a low-cost gym, a premium club, a boutique studio. They can do fitness at home. Then there's a whole wearable ecosystem. There are influencer-led programs. There's AI coach, there's recovery studios, there's run clubs, and even events like High Rocks, which are coming up with their own training programs. So the competitive set is no longer just that gym across the street. It's really anything that can replace the actual habit of going to the gym. And that really matters because our industry is growing rapidly and it's also growing globally. Here are some examples. In the US today, fitness facility membership reached more than 81 million people in 2025, with more than 100 million people using fitness facilities in some form. And usage was incredibly strong as well. And this is a crazy stat, which I found out from researching for this episode. We had nearly 7 billion visits recorded in the US in 2025, and the share of members not visiting at all falling down to an all-time low of just 4.6%. And that is very different than 10 years ago. In Europe, the market continues to grow as well, reaching more than 75 million members and close to 40 billion euros in revenue. And yet, when we zoom out globally, the public health challenge is still enormous. We talk about the World Health Organization estimating that 31% of adults and 80% of adolescents do not meet the minimum standards of physical activity. So we have two large things happening at once. On one hand, the fitness industry is growing, but the need for fitness, health, movement, and behavior change is still much larger than the industry itself. And I think that creates a huge opportunity for us. But it also creates a much harder retention challenge. And that's because the modern consumer has more options, they have more information, more flexibility, and more ways to leave. They expect things like convenience and personalization, digital support, transparency in pricing. They expect flexibility. And increasingly, they expect to be able to cancel as easy as it was for them to sign up. So if you operate a gym or studio today, whether you are a Planet Fitness, a Basic Fit, a Good Life, a Crunch, or a local boutique studio, retention might be one of the most important problems in the business. It's no longer enough just to sell a membership. You have to earn the next visit. You have to earn the next week. You've got to earn the next month. And ultimately, and I talk about this a lot, you've got to become a part of someone's life. And that's why I'm really excited for today's conversation, because our guest today has literally spent decades studying why members stay, why they leave, and what operators often misunderstood about retention.
Very excited to have you back on. We've spoke a lot, Paul, and I was digging as I was preparing for this exercise. I was digging, and you've been blogging quite a lot recently, and I found some of your one of your blog posts that you did a couple of months ago, and it was referring to this. I think it's a book actually from the exercise sociologist Mary McElroy, and her argument is something that the industry doesn't seem to have wanted to pay too much attention to. And it says that inactivity isn't apathy, it's resistance. And in your post, you refer to this self-protective response to environments that make people feel exposed or judged or like they don't belong. And it references that mirrors aren't motivation for someone that's already self-conscious. They feel like they're surveillance, and that the fitness culture has spent decades moralizing exercise, trying to characterize it when someone stops coming, they don't just feel unfit, they feel as though they've morally failed in some way. And some of your data shows that members are avoiding things like the front desk after a gap, walking back in saying they've been bad, or there's some kind of shame as opposed to a motivation problem. And then when they cancel, they lie about why they're canceling, because the real reason is uncomfortable to say, which means that operators seem to be building retention strategies on data that doesn't necessarily reflect what you think is the actual reality. So the question to you, Paul, is you've spent 20 years telling the industry that when members leave, it's not necessarily the members' fault. In some cases, there's a big there's a big impact that the operators have on this. So I wanted to ask you, do you think they're listening yet? Based on what Mo said, it does seem to be getting better, but are the operators actually in the business of building fitness habits, or do you think they're still selling memberships and causing churn, some kind of personal failure of their clients?
Okay, so I think to answer it, there's multiple parts to that, but I think the industry's certainly growing. We're opening more clubs. I do believe we're getting more members, but one of the things that I think the industry is misinterpreting is they're counting memberships as members. And so if you've got, I think in your introduction, Mo, I think you said there was like 80 million memberships now, or 80 million members. Now, I already know 3 or 4 people that I speak to on a regular basis who have 3 or 4 health club memberships. And if you ask the operators directly, how many members have you got? Club 1 says I've got 1,000. Club 2 says I've got 1,000. So does 3 and 4. But that one person could be members of 4 clubs and gets counted 4 times. And if someone joins and leaves within a year, between, when you're surveying them, you could get counted twice because you were in one club and now you're in another. So I do think there's a little bit of not deliberate misrepresentation. I definitely don't think it's that, but I do think it's the how we're counting check-ins and how we're counting members. I've just got this thing of, I'm thinking some of that's memberships and it's not members.
So I'm just curious, how should operators think about retention in that case when the membership journey is really so fragmented? Because you're today, and I've got a couple examples here, right? Even if you look at apps, most fitness, if you're into fitness and you belong to the gym, you have about 3.5 apps that you're using.
Yeah.
They might belong to a low-cost gym. They might be taking a Pilates, studio as well. They may use this digital platform. They may be doing a High Rocks, and right to your point, attending a sauna studio somewhere else. But how should we be thinking about retention? Because I think what you're saying is, are you capturing all the value of that member, or are you allowing them to go and have that experience somewhere else?
Well, I think traditionally operators have always looked at it as they are our members and we're going to ring fence them. They belong to us and we're going to stop them going anywhere else. I think members nowadays are going, actually, I don't want one experience. I want multiple experiences. And if we ran it parallel to something like restaurants, you don't go to one restaurant exclusively and not go anywhere else in your spare time. You might go to one on a regular. You might have your favorite restaurant that you go to when it's a special occasion, or on a regular basis. Then you might have somewhere else you go for something else because they do a different type of cuisine. And I think we're seeing much more of the consumer treating fitness like they would restaurant behavior. And so I think the operator's role is to, rather than saying we need them coming 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and fulfilling all their experiences here, it's thinking along the lines of, if they're coming 1 or 2 times a week here and they sustain that behavior, we should celebrate that. And we should be focusing on how many weeks and months of membership we're generating rather than the visits per week, just as a count of what's going on. I use my niece as an example, case study of one. She has a membership at a low cost, high volume operation. She does hot yoga regularly, on a regular basis, but not every week. She's part of a run club, and she doesn't see that as abnormal. That's just part of her fitness suite of activities. So I think operators are going to really have to start thinking about, we don't own the whole member experience. And I know the big boxes are trying to do that, and that's why they adopted a lot of the boutique approaches sort of post-pandemic, and a lot of them are signing up to things like High Rocks, like you mentioned in the introduction, to get people in or to keep them there. But I think the days of one membership are coming to an end. And your role is now going to be, I need them to use my facility for as long as possible, so retaining them, but don't expect exclusivity from that member.
So then should the focus, I guess otherwise said, be to say, identify the thing that you do well, knowing why your member is a part of that gym, and really key in on that, because you know that in the example of Denise, she's going to go back to that facility, whether it's that local HVLP provider or the boutique studio or the run club, over and over and over again, as
Yeah.
long as you
Oh,
don't change that.
definitely. And I think, and I know there's Rory Sutherland, the guy from Ogilvy, who does a lot of really clever stuff on marketing. He's always talking about doubling down on the thing that your competitor can't do. Do more of what they can't do that you can do really, really well. And I do think that's an approach. I do think that's the approach we'll look at. And it's, from my side of things, it's trying to measure retention is going to become even more difficult over time if you're talking about the individual and tracking everything that the individual does, because one club won't be able to track all of that. Because, like you said, they'll be doing alternative activities or other preferred activities with other suppliers.
So going back to this question then, Paul, about the post that you make in terms of the psychology of the member feeling judged, feeling self-conscious. So if we sort of dovetail that into the previous comment, okay, we've got to figure out how we measure retention, because people are using many different locations. That's one part. But what about when they do come in and how they feel about that experience? Like what would you do to comment on that point?
So I'd start with, I think if you're talking about new exercises, and we have to, a lot of the way the industry markets, it sort of markets to activity in terms of come and do this class, come and use the gym. But once they're in, I think we should be segmenting on behaviour, how many times they're visiting, how long they're visiting for. So there's a different, because they sort of, after a while, they blend into more than one activity. But I think what's the best way of putting this? It's anxiety management with new exercises, but it's also anxiety management with experienced exercises in new environments. So I'll give an example. My daughter trains, she's a martial artist. She trains at a Muay Thai gym, and I take her training on frequently. I was sitting watching her train one night, standing next to one of the other parents. And we got chatting, and she said she represented the UK in Taekwondo at the Olympics. And I was like, wow. I said, how come you're not in there? She goes, oh, no, that's far too intimidating. And I'm like, you're an Olympian and you're anxious about going into that room because it's a different style of combat sport. And so she goes in there almost as a beginner again. And I think we underestimate the anxiety that drives behavior negatively, in terms of, if I come into an environment and I feel out of place, I don't feel like I look like everybody else, I don't feel like I've been accepted yet, why would I stay? I might as well sit at home with a packet of chips and be comfortable in my discomfort rather than go there and highlight all of that. So I think for new exercises, it's about that early stages of onboarding. It's the early creating or reducing anxiety, keeping things really simple for people so they become successful really quickly. And that will help build the idea of an exercise identity. I'm the type of person that does go to the gym, to a studio, to a class and works out. Because certainly when people first start, they don't have that identity. Now, all three of us have that identity, no matter where we are in the world, even if on days we're not training. But we've built that over time, and it's taken us, if you think back to when you very first started exercising, we had to be resilient in environments we weren't necessarily comfortable in.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wonder, this goes back to, I talk a lot about the idea of having that brand be an identity or creating a lifestyle. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I've had the good fortune of working with what I would call more premium brands, especially here in the US, very early with SoulCycle, and I got to see how they were able to leverage the hero instructor, the scarcity of classes, as they were scaling up, you could not get in, the premiumization of it, and just little things as it relates to even how the studio is set up, having the small hallways bumping into each other, the creation of community, and all of those things. At the same time, looking at brands like Equinox, really the idea there behind what we try to do was to make that your entire lifestyle, make that a part of your identity. But fast forward 10 years later, and I think identity is very personal. And in some ways, so you've seen brands that are outside the gym,
Mm.
such as High Rocks, become that identity. You've seen wearable companies like an Aura will become that identity. You might even see a digital company like a
Yeah.
Peloton become that identity. Do you think, if you're a gym, that how important does identity play into retention overall? Because for HLP brands, it's obviously something that's hard to create. No one's going to say identify with Planet Fitness, but they might identify
Yeah.
with David Lloyd's. They might identify with Lifetime. I think that the premium segment has an identity component to it.
Yeah, and I think some of that identity with some of the premiums also status. It's like I'm an Equinox member, or I'm a David Lloyd member, or I'm a member of a Midtown Athletic. The identity part for me initially is all about the management of anxiety and improvement in terms of confidence and competence, their ability to exercise independently if required, and perform the exercises like in a way that they feel comfortable doing. The challenge with the low cost operators, whatever we refer to them as, is that then becomes the identity is generated by the other members. So if I go back to my niece and I said, she's a member of a low cost, she's a member of a run club. The run club are all members of the low cost, but it's nothing to do with the low cost. She's also a member of their social club, which is nothing to do with the business. It's organised by one of the members. And so people will form communities and create these identities that they align with independently of an operator if there's someone there to facilitate it. So you don't need but the low cost operators are at the mercy of whatever the culture is within the club. Whereas someone like an Equinox, they're creating the culture, they're helping create the identity. In fact, their marketing pushes the identity of, I'm, more affluent, I'm health conscious, and I'm not like everybody else. I think
How would you see that? Paul, just to jump in there for a second, like I think you make an interesting point, and certainly many of a lot of US brands I've seen, I could see how that works. So, like one of the interesting things I would like your view. If you look at the UK, there's two kind of low cost brands. You've got Pure Gym and Gym Group, and then also now you have people like Everlast, JD Gym that kind of fit into a similar category. Now, I would say that there'd be a very different identity for me. Like I would see my mum and dad probably going to a Pure Gym or Gym Group, where I'd probably see a much younger person going into a different one purely because of how the brand has positioned itself. So how does that play in? Does that override what you've just said in any way?
No, I don't think so. And I think depending on where, I think it's still locationally biased. So, where I am, all four of those brands, only three of them exist in where I live, but if all four of them did, I think they would still generally attract a lower age group market, because the alternative for someone like your parents' age or someone of my age, I do train in those types of clubs, but I use them as a utility. It's a place to go, train and leave. I'm not thinking of hanging about. It's convenient. It's got a lot of equipment. It also happens to be near somewhere I visit frequently, so I can pop in and have a workout. Whereas the sort of the more mid-market are much more likely to start to generate this sense of I'm part of something, because it becomes a destination rather than just a utility as a product.
Today's episode of the Lifts podcast is sponsored by EGYM. EGYM delivers smart strength solutions that help gyms and health clubs attract, engage, and retain members while improving health outcomes at scale. From intelligent equipment to AI-powered training programming and corporate wellness via WellPass, EGYM is leading the way in smart fitness. Visit egym.com to learn more.
I'm sure we could spend an entire episode on this next question I have for you here, but because your work spans with operators really around the world. How do you view, I guess I'll take one step back, when you've seen international brands, and I've had experience having Equinox
Yeah.
go to the UK or SoulCycle go into Canada and then the UK. Pure Gym more recently acquired Blink and come to the US. They don't find the success that they have in their domestic market. You're seeing brands like Basic Fit go internationally, pick up a different modality like they did in Germany to go into franchising. You're seeing brands like Gym Nation do a tremendous job in the Gulf region. And I think the strategies really, one, consumers are very different and fickle around the world in their own way. The strategy needs to be very, very different. What I guess the first part of the question is what do you see differently around the world? And maybe you could break it down by markets, US, Europe, the Middle East. And then how should operators be thinking about these markets differently?
So let me work backwards. How do I think they should be thinking about them? I think it's, and I can't remember the exact term. It's driving me mad but it's like nationally representative, locally relevant. So it's modifying your product to match the environment you're working in. I travel, like you said, I travel all over the world. I see Starbucks all over the world. I don't see the same products in Starbucks all over the world. There might be some core products, but you go to some countries and there's a much greater emphasis on the food and the food rather than the beverage, or the types of beverages that are available. You go to one of the ones that I was aware of when I was in the Middle East recently was the home brand from its home country would often have, I'm going to call them carpet tiles. That might sound a little bit old-fashioned, but it's a carpet type flooring throughout the gym. Every locally developed brand had hard tiling. And everywhere you go, it's hard tiling because that makes sense in that environment. But I think, the operator coming in went, this is what we do in our home country. We're going to drop that in. And it just didn't work. Even down to how people use showers. I was in Norway last week, and I was in a gym that has no staff. It's fully unmanned. Like, if you can be fully unmanned, it's like no staff. They have some personal trainers work there, but there's no staff. Culture in Norway is when you arrive, you take off your outdoor shoes and you put on your workout shoes. And there were racks full of shoes of people who that's the normal thing to do. Whereas I think if a UK operator went into Norway and didn't know that was the culture, they wouldn't provide the things in the first place because they wouldn't think to do it because we don't do it in the UK. So I think they have to be really mindful, and I think having a local understanding of what's going on can really, really make a difference. I think, and I could be wrong with this, when Pure Gym in the US converted the Blink clubs into more of a pure model, people were outraged by the entry pods because of the way they opened and closed.
It was weird for me. I was like, what? Am I going to get stuck in this thing?
Yeah. But here, it's either that or like traditional turnstiles. We're used to seeing that because they've always built them that way. So our first impression is, oh, that's how they control excess. There was even a joke at one point that in those pods, they would weigh you to make sure that your weight was what it was each time, to prove that it was you, not like using someone else's membership. It wasn't. It never did. But you see it as creepy. I see it as normal. Because I think it's where the brand originates from. There can often be these, we've seen a lot of US brands come to the UK as big operators and not be successful. And I think it's because it's like, and it's not just with the US brands.
Well, if you were Solid Core, who's now coming, they've announced that they're coming to the UK. I don't know how familiar you are with Solid Core, but if you were talking to them, what are some words of advice that you would give to them?
They need to make sure they've got a really good UK marketing team that can interpret their traditional marketing into a more into what's acceptable here, and also have a really strong operations person who understands the UK market. So I refer to them as COO. Different businesses call them different things, but someone who really understands how to operate a business in the UK, and then look at the solid core model and go, okay, that might work in the US. We'll try it here, but don't stay wedded to it. I think what I've seen in the past over the years is people wedded to their original concept are not prepared to modify it regionally. And I think that's where people have struggled.
One of the things, Paul, that I found interesting, particularly coming from you, really, was there was another post you did, which was talking about how how operators segment their members in very, very similar ways to what they always have done, which is demographics, visits that you mentioned earlier, frequency and spend. Yeah. And it seems though you did some analysing around behaviour patterns across multiple large data sets, and something kept surfacing, which was date of birth. And you did this piece where you'd group them into the 4 zodiac categories, which was fire, earth, air, and water. And it produced these different behavioural profiles. And it got me thinking, look, you've got a PhD, 5.5 million data points, and 30 years of peer-reviewed research. And I was just curious, what it seemed a little bit of a strange thing to link astrology into some of this scientific work. Like, what was the thought process behind that one?
Okay, Matthew, you're going to hate me for this. You need to look at when it was published. Because it was published.
Oh, okay.
It was published.
Okay,
on the 1st
now
of
you're
April.
telling. Okay. That definitely makes. Is there any? Okay, then is there anything in that then, or is that like it's an April Fool? You definitely got me on that one.
I got lots of people on that one, but it came from a discussion that I was having in China, where I was being asked, "Does year of birth in the Chinese zodiac sign make an impact on retention?" And I was like, "I doubt it, but let me have a look." Because sometimes you just have to look outside of what you think, And then we did it, I'd meant to have published that about 3 years ago. And I had it all laid out. And then I had someone sit down with me who actually is really into astrology and I'm saying, which of these signs would behave like this? And they go, well, that would be a Taurus. And that would be, and I'm like, we don't see it. But I think sometimes you have to look for things that you don't expect to give you insights. And, I come from that training background of academia. And, too often I hear people say, oh, if it's not that, if it's not, I forgot the term, like the validated approach. It's got it's had a critical analysis and all these things. I'm like, yeah, but everything starts with an idea. I said, there's no evidence base to start with. You have to have an idea, go and test something, produce it. It has to be evidence based. When everyone goes, oh, training has to be evidence based. Well, at some point it started with an idea. Go back to people like Charles Poliquin. Charles was using what was already evidence-based, but then going, actually, I've got this idea about the importance of the postural chain in terms of the way the back plays and the glutes play in sport. I did that because it was an April Fool, but I think the industry gets tied up into the metrics it's always measured, and I think some of that's driven by investors. I think the investors want things that they're familiar with and seeing as numbers rather than things that you go, actually, have you thought about this? Like dwell time. If people who stay longer in the club, do they stay longer as members? When do people start buying personal training? Because if you only track the number of convert when they first sign up, you'll miss a huge cohort of people who sign up after 6 months. So that was a joke, but I'm always conscious of looking for things that are, will this give us an insight? Is it an indicator? And can we use that?
Paul, as the next topic, I want to talk about the changing member models or changing membership
Mm.
plans. One of the things that I think I spent a lot of time just thinking through and talking to operators around is we have gone, if you follow the evolution of memberships from annual contracts decades ago. In fact, some countries today in Asia still have annual contracts. You pay for your membership, 1 year at a time, to then going to twice a year, to then monthly contracts. Now you could join and cancel at any time. I think the next evolution of that is really going to be the gym is going to be free, and you are only going to be paying for utilization when you show up to the gym, or what facilities you use within the gym. And a lot of that's been driven by the evolution of, I think, alternative payment types and payment methods. Looking at the class passes, the well hubs. So whether it is they're using an aggregator model or it's been more of a corporate membership play. I'm just curious to get your perspective on, do you think that gyms have to be looking forward and saying we have to be more flexible in our membership
Yeah, I think so,
offering?
but I think you have to also be mindful to not have too many different offerings, because as soon as you start having too many different offerings, people then worry about making the wrong decision to buy, rather than being clear about what they are buying. I think what you'll have is experienced exercisers, and well, this is what we've seen. Experienced exercisers don't mind signing up for longer periods if they get a discount on that, because they know they're going to use it. Whereas new to exercise are often anxious about whether they'll be able to stick to this. So they're often naturally moved towards the low cost operators because of the cost of join or the use is low to start with. So the risk reward, the risk is quite low. I do think we're seeing already more people using, almost pay as you go, as I would refer to it, pay per visit. The challenge for operators is that money can go away really, really quickly. And in fact, when we did research on the boutique market, people who were paying for paying for individual sessions or short packs of 5 really didn't stay. It was the people who were paying for greater packs. So we're buying 10s, 15s, 20s, they'd stay longer. And when some of the boutiques we worked with had a membership, the people who signed up to membership always stayed longer than the people who paid per visit. So I think there's going to be some real challenges. And I think, you were talking about utilization. I often joke, and I think one of the blogs I did a number of years ago was on, imagine an industry where we only got paid on results. How many operators would go out of business if you got paid once the client got the result?
Which we're calling outcome based, right? Look, I don't think that's far out. I would argue that people are going to be asking for that and saying, I'm going to commit to you, and as long as I show up and I do the things you tell me to do, because as an industry we're more connected than ever with wearables and food logging. I think we're going to be seeing that model not be in the fringes, but I think we're going to see some mainstream brands in the next 5 years come out with outcome-based metrics.
But I think, the challenge around, I like the outcome-based metrics thing. I am really happy with that. I think the challenge with paying per visit is, climatic conditions can change. And if you're in some of the northern states in America, the snow comes in, it's like, well, I'm not going today because of the snow. Clubs don't get the money, so the pricing might have to reflect a less frequent visitor or the weather, And I don't think dynamic pricing is ever going to work in the fitness industry, because I don't think we don't have a lack of resource. So I hear lots of people going, oh, we're going to do dynamic pricing where the price moves up and down. I just won't go when it's expensive, or I won't join when it's expensive. It's not like a flight where I actually need to be somewhere on a certain date. And if I don't buy it early enough, I'm going to have to pay more.
I think you're going to have a lot of challenges to that. In fact, we should clip that little piece out and put it out, because I'd love to get comments from the industry. I know some good people. Matthew, you and I know Felipe,
Yeah, I was on a call yesterday just about it, who seems to be working, like it's still early days, and we'll definitely have to get Felipe on with you probably, Paul. But the first few months are extremely successful for him. So that'll be an interesting one.
But the interesting thing is, Matt, and I don't know how he's doing it,
right?
but it's working for him, but will it work for the members long term? Because you know how you feel when you go online to book a flight and the price is one thing, and then you come back an hour later and it's almost double. You're like, you hate them.
Well, you think you've been cookied, and every time, and I think in some cases when you do go back on, it goes up and up and up, and so I think there's a natural distrust in now they've pinged something to me and they're just pulling the wool over my eyes and thinking I'm stupid.
But what I'm saying is also...
I don't want to say anything against Felipe because he's a great client.
No, nor do I. And I don't know how his model's working, but we did some dynamic pricing modelling for an operator probably more around 10 years ago, and they were a low-cost operator. And what they reported back to us once they'd applied it was people just waited till the price went back down before they joined. It's almost like waiting for Black Friday. Well, I'm not buying it this week because next week it's going to be on sale. Mm-hmm. And we've also got now a much broader offering. So I can just go down the road.
Just to jump on that, because it kind of not that it conflicts, but it just there was a question around boutiques, and one of the things I read, and I hope this one isn't an April Fool, but it said that you felt that some of the boutique operators get it wrong when they reward intensity over consistency, and I suppose what we were talking about previously was that we were rewarding around results. So for me, aren't results intensity in some ways? And if we did reward around, if we did start rewarding around consistency, which I guess also leads to results, do you think that would change in any way the model of the boutiques in a positive aspect?
Well, the boutiques already at some level do reward and recognise consistency with their I think it's pure. It might not be Pure Bar, but one of the bar businesses is like you've done 1,000 workouts. Peloton do it with the Century Ride. They're recognising milestone visit frequency, and that's total visits rather than consistency. But I think what a lot of the boutiques did was they went for the maximum intensity rather than the minimum dose required. So the way I train now is I do only the amount I need to do and no more, even though I have greater capacity. I'm not pushing myself to do HIIT classes and come out not being able to walk. I'm going to do things that give me the benefits, but none of the negatives. And there's a guy I think he'd be useful for you to talk to at some point. He's a tech guy. I was talking to him at an event recently. His name's Steve, and he created, using Claude, a behavioural model for himself about what he needs to do now to still be able to do this range of behaviours he's defined when he's 80. And so rather than killing himself, it's saying you need to be able to do this amount of walking. You need to be able to lift this amount because he's worked out how much he's going to lose. So it's still long-term goal setting, but instead of goal setting for ultimate performance, it's like the minimum dose required to be able to still live the life I've currently got.
I have another quick question for you before we go to our wrap up here is, do you still think rewards and gamification and loyalty, you kind of talk about gamification with the milestone based recognitions, but do you still think that they are valuable today as they were 10 years ago?
Yeah. No, I do think they are. But I do think they need to, they fit the types of rewards and the types of gamification fit, there are different models for different businesses. A bit like if you look at games, you've got one person shoot 'em ups, you've got group games, you've got fantasy the sense that gamification is the same thing for everybody, I don't think is true. We've just finished working with an operator that gamifies the workout and rewards with medals. And we were able to show that their approach certainly increased lifetime value. So everybody that was going for medals, whichever level of medal they were going for, it was increasing their lifetime value by somewhere like 5 to 7 months compared to people who weren't doing it. So, but not everybody's driven by it. You know, if I went into those workouts and they go, "Oh, you could earn this medal," I just don't care. You know, it's not a motivator for me. So
Yeah,
I think
which is different because my 3-year-old, we signed up for this race series here in Arlington, Virginia, and every Sundays at 4:00 they run like a 50-yard dash for kids, and all season she did not want to go. She's like, I'm not running today, Dad. Not doing it.
Yeah.
But then the last day of the season, if you ran that last race, you get a medal. She said, I'm running it today, because that was what motivated her.
Oh, I don't know if it's age. Is it age or is it a setup? Because for me, I've been doing my zone for like a decade. Right. I think it's 12 years. But for me, I'm just like, I've got to get to the top and then I'm done with it kind of thing. So I don't know whether it's necessarily, do you think, Paul, it's more of a kind of psychological thing, how certain people are wired, or?
I do think it's what people put value on. And I think, when you're talking about my zone and you're trying to get to the next level, that's the Zeigarnik effect. It's a psychological effect where you want to complete something and you keep working on it till it's completed. And that's how gaming works in terms of going up levels and, and all those types of things. I respond to that, but not in an exercise environment, if that makes sense. So the Zeigarnik effect still has an impact on me. It just doesn't do it in an exercise environment.
It must work for your daughter though, because she's like with a belt system.
Well, she's a good fighter. Yeah, but the thing is, like, her style of, we were talking about this the other week, in lots of the Japanese-based martial arts, you have a belt-based system that gives recognition.
Oh, right.
In Muay Thai, there's no belts. There's no evaluations. It's fights. So all they go, the questions you get asked, if you walk into a Muay Thai gym, first 2 questions are, how old are you and what do you weigh? Because they're trying to think of, can they match you? And then they go, how many fights have you had? And it's based on fighting. Whereas like the Japanese ones, it's like, oh, I've gone from white belt to, I'm going to say yellow, then red, then orange. But I think that's more of a Western thing where we've been able to like layer on fees. There's a grading, you got to pay for a grading. We want another one, so you got to pay for another one. Muay Thai is very similar to boxing in that it's based around the actual sport. And so she's not motivated by any type of belt. All she wants to do is fight the best fighters. So she'll look down the rankings and go, I want to fight them next. Because she wants to test herself against the best fighters rather than have this mechanism or this measurement that is sort of arbitrary or decided upon by someone else. We know if she's won or lost, and sometimes it's really close. But at the end of the day, it's like there's a fight, you win, you lose, it's only you, and no one's judging you on the quality of what you're doing. They're judging you on, did you win it or not? So,
well, Paul, it's been great to have you on. We love to wrap up with a final thought. Matthew, I want to start with you, but I don't want you to use an April Fool's reference that Paul posted as a final takeaway.
I know. I'm never going to live that one down, am I? He definitely got me on.
That's all right, mate. No, look, all it says is you were going through the different posts that I've done, and there was a few people messaged me on the day going, yeah, you got me. Yeah, you got me.
I didn't pick up but now I'm going to be aware in future whenever I do my research into what they've written. I'm like, what date did they say that? But coming back, I think you make a good point around the minimum required dosage. Like one of the things I've been doing with my own training, we got a product called Load, and we do this strength training, and it's almost like I sort of termed it the Pareto workout, which is, what's the 20% that has the 80% of impact. And I think certainly in my experience, I've been working out for like 30 plus years now, and I definitely can sometimes I go through periods where I do a lot, do not a lot, but I know there's a few things that I need to do where I can pretty much keep myself in shape and maintain my muscle. And I do think there's something in that. And I don't know whether technology now will allow us to figure what that is, what that minimum dosage is. I don't know whether people like EGYM, who's one of our sponsors, by the way, no plug, but whether they're able to figure that through some of the technology that they've got. But I do think that's a really interesting thing, because in a lot of cases, we don't need to do as much as what we think. We don't need to kill ourselves. And particularly as you get above 40, I think being able to have this outcome based, but the minimum dosage, I think there's something quite interesting in that. And I want to know whether you've got any thoughts on that, Paul, as well.
Well, I have this concept. It's not my concept or but it's optimizing versus satisficing. Optimizing is, I think, where all the technology is taking us. How many reps, how many sets, how much rest, how much sleep, what should we eat? It's numbers based. Satisficing is when I turn up and just do enough and I've done something and I walk away internally fulfilled that I've done something today rather than nothing. And I think we don't give enough value to that. Just the turning up and doing something, because that would probably be in, when you're describing it, those stages where you're not training as hard, but you're doing something and you're doing this minimum required. And I think as people age, I think we should be focusing on that. What's the minimum you need to do, rather than how fit can we get you? Because not everybody's motivated by that. They're motivated by, I just want to be able to get up out of the sofa without using my arms, or, all the old cliches about play with my grandchildren. They make a difference. But I don't need to be an athlete to do those things.
Yeah. Mo, takeaways from today's episode. We covered a lot.
We did. I think the biggest one for me, which I noted down here, is that retention is really about whether the experience becomes meaningful enough to repeat. Because you're never, where the consumer is going today, it's not about, and I guess some clubs kind of achieve that in the premium side, David Lloyd's, Lifetime, and Equinox, where they have this large facility, multiple use, child care included, which for parents with young kids is so important. But outside of that, for the vast majority of the population, is the experience for why I'm showing up good enough? So I think it's back to the fundamentals, Paul, in a lot of ways. Like you mentioned, clean facilities, understanding your local community, awareness around equipment, how to use that equipment. It goes back to the basic fundamentals, even though we live in this age, in this AI era. I think a focus on the fundamentals is going to be one of the key levers for retention.
Paul, if there was one final takeaway then you could leave for anyone listening, boil down your many years of experience, what would you like to leave the listeners with today?
I think some of it's what Mo's just said, is definitely each visit has to create some level of positive experience. The positive experience doesn't necessarily have to be a high five or a meaningful conversation, but it's not a negative experience that the person's leaving with, because at the end of each workout and before the next one, there'll be a process where people will evaluate the last one and go, was that good enough, as Mo suggested, to repeat again, or am I going to go somewhere else? And so I think a lot of operators need to start, if they've got the resource to do it, double down on their staff and thinking like, how do we make the experience a positive experience relative to the individual?
Well, Paul, it's been fantastic to have you on. And for all of you listening, thank you so much for joining us. If you have not watched us on YouTube, please do. We do share data and reports on YouTube as well. And you also get to see our pretty faces most of the time. And we have also released a Lift briefs. Episodes like this, including highlights from the episode, will be in the Lift brief. And if you've not signed up, you can go to our website, liftspodcast.com, to sign up for that. We are also excited just to expand our platform. We're showing up to cities. We've got the AthletiTech event next year, and would appreciate you liking the episode, telling more people about it so that we can have incredible guests like Paul back on.